For years, one of the biggest voices, and definitely the biggest voice in comic books, was Wizard magazine. It would be hard to overstate the importance of Wizard and the way that it influenced everything we know about pop culture today. It had something for everybody, you know, there were features for the mainstream comic books and mainstream superheroes. It also had features for those same characters outside of comic books, like what are they doing in movies and in TV. Probably the biggest and most important thing was when Wizard magazine first started, was when we were seeing this big explosion of other publishers rising up in comic books and becoming successful. It had guides for people who wanted to collect comics, and it had guides for people who wanted to collect comics and make money off of it. It had ideas for people who wanted to get into comic books. It had ideas for people who wanted to just get better at things like drawing and writing so they could make better comic books. It had interviews with people in the industry. It was huge. In fact, it's so big that I've said to people, and I stand by this, the goal of Comic Crash, everything I'm doing here on YouTube, you can find it on TikTok, Instagram, wherever. My guiding star for it has been, I want to become Wizard magazine. Circa 2011, somewhere in there, they ended up selling off all of their conventions to the Fan Expo convention people, and they just disappeared. Thing is though, almost immediately after they stopped publishing physical issues, and especially after they stopped existing on the internet, people have been looking for, okay, where is the next Wizard magazine coming from? Where is this? We need a voice like this in comic books. And it looks like somebody has attempted it. This is Comics the Magazine, and it's kind of a big deal because for the past months, like long time, when the first moment news about this thing dropped, it was immediately compared to Wizard magazine. It's like this was billed and advertised as the resurrection of Wizard. And they've certainly put themselves on the right track to do it. First of all, it's $3. That is awesome. That is so cheap compared to pretty much anything else you could buy at a comic shop. I mean, what was it? I don't think I pick up new single issues for less than $4 these days. So already, it's cheaper. In the first issue, they have an interview with all of the people from the creative team of Absolute Batman, easily the biggest single monthly issue that's being released right now. Already this is setting itself up to do something really interesting. So I want to go through this magazine with you guys. Let's see if it really is everything it says it is. So the first thing I notice when I open this up is the cover. But then the second thing I notice is the back cover, because now it's no longer on a board. The back cover has an ad for CGC. The CGC is kind of a controversial thing. It's about grading and preserving comics, and there's some conversation about how they do that, whether or not it's right or ethical, or whether you should even be grading comics, and I don't know, people go back and forth on that a lot. But the fact that they're advertising collecting on the back in such a prominent way like this, that's interesting. That already sets a precedent for what's going to be in the magazine, but that's just the cover. We haven't even gotten inside this, so let's hop in. Let's see what's here. The next thing we get is an advertisement for a collected edition of the Spider-Man newspaper strip, which actually makes me feel a lot better, because when I first saw this book, I didn't think it was published by DC, but I suddenly got a lot of doubts because, Batman's very prominently on the cover, which makes sense. That's the big feature article. But also they put DC's logo right there next to the barcode, which had me a little bit worried that is this secretly published by DC? But the fact that they put a Marvel thing right on the second page, that makes me feel a lot better. Next we get a letter from the people who make the magazine, make Comics the Magazine, kind of explaining what this is. They don't name drop Wizard specifically, but they point out that the way people have read comic books has changed drastically over time, and we're right in the middle of a big shift in the way that people are seeing comic books in specifically the United States, but I think internationally this applies too. You go back a billion years, and at the very beginning of comics, your first comic was probably something from a newspaper. And that stuck around for a very long time. You got the newspaper for 100 different reasons. Everyone got the newspaper, and within the newspaper you would get a bunch of comics, and these got really popular. These were oftentimes people's first exposure to the medium. Fast forward a few years, your first comic book was probably an actual comic book that probably featured a superhero. When Wizard came about in the 90s, you had a different approach to comics. All of a sudden you had third-party publishers like Image or Dynamite or Boom, or like one of these other publishers that wasn't Marvel or DC, making very different kinds of comics. Yeah, most of them probably had a superhero, but you'd also have things like Ninja Turtles that didn't quite fit the superhero mold. Or Spawn, that was like, yeah, it's kind of superhero-y, but not really. Not in the same way, anyway. And so that was the environment that Wizard was able to really succeed in, was this environment where new people were coming into comics because it no longer seemed like the only options were funny cartoons in your newspaper or superheroes. And that's really interesting. And I've noticed that nowadays we're kind of in the same type of shifting. Right now I'm noticing that most people, their first comic that I come across anyway, are people who watched an anime and picked up the book related to the anime. Or there were people who started reading something on Webtoon. They heard a friend was reading a free comic on a free app, and they downloaded the free app and read the free comic, and that's what got them hooked into it. And so Comics the Magazine points this out in their first letter to everybody, in like the first page, and suggests that this magazine is going to help champion those voices. It's going to champion the books that are not necessarily mainstream, but could be a good gateway for people to get into either third parties, or a good gateway to get people who are already in third parties into mainstream. And that's really exciting. I'm really excited about that, and I've noticed that they do highlight that as they go through things like interviews, or as they talk to creators, that anytime a creator brings up a book that isn't the main thing they're there to talk about, they'll highlight it, they'll bold it, so that now you have a title. And on top of that, they do something really, really cool at the end here. Next we have letters to the editor. This is the first issue. This is issue number 1. So there's not a whole lot of people to write letters in, because nobody was there to say anything. So they make up this fun thing with Chip Zdarsky, and that's kind of fun. Next, and what is definitely the big draw of the issue, is they have a big, several pages interview with the entire creative team behind Absolute Batman. Absolute Batman has been killing it in the industry. It's been doing huge things, making big numbers, setting all kinds of records. Its first issue, within less than a year of existing, is on its 10th printing. That is almost unheard of in comic books, especially these days, that a single issue will sell so well that they have to send it back to the printers 10 times. They interview the letterers, they interview the colorists, everybody who's involved in the making of the book, they interview, which is exciting, because I noticed that a lot of teams for comic books, it kind of gets boiled down to, and I've been guilty of doing this myself, it's a bad habit I promise I'm trying to break. They'll just boil it down to the writer and the artist, when there's so many more people involved. You got publishers, you got letterers who are making very important decisions, you have colorists who are making extremely important decisions, and they respect that and they honor that throughout this interview, and it's so cool. And like I said, anytime they're highlighting the title of any book, anytime somebody says a title, they bold it and they keep track of that. And like I said, later that's going to be really interesting. And then this was a nice surprise. They have a supplemental interview right here with the creative team behind Absolute Catwoman, the first true spin-off of one of these Absolute DC books, and it's really cool. Next, they have an interview with Ronda Rousey, of all people. Turns out Ronda Rousey is making a comic book, and they just wanted to show that off, and that's cool, and they do this a lot. There's a lot of places in here where they'll just interview somebody who's involved with a third-party book that has some interesting angle on it. You know, you have Ronda Rousey who's doing this third-party book, so that's interesting. We'll interview her. How did you go from MMA, being huge in MMA, to making a comic? And that's kind of neat. Now we have an editorial. This one about the one Swamp Thing issue. I forgot that we're doing this. There was a Swamp Thing series that had its ending tweaked in a way that, like, the creators did not want the ending tweaked, so they left. And the story was never properly finished. And later this year, they're going to release the finished, true ending to the Swamp Thing line. And that's kind of big, so they just had a little editorial about it. They have a round table here. This reads kind of like if you were to go to a Comic-Con and sit at a panel and listen to a panel of experts talk about a particular topic. That's what Wizard kind of was. Wizard was like reading a Comic-Con in a magazine form every month. So this is cool. This is an important type of content to have in your comic book magazine because it simulates what that experience is like in text form. It's very, very cool. We have more editorials about more obscure comics. This one is written by, what's his name? Dave Baker. This one is written by Dave Baker, and at the end, he also gets to advertise his own graphic novel, which is kind of cool. I don't know if Dave Baker is supposed to be like a regular part of this magazine. Is he credited up here? No, he's not. He's not credited in the letters page. So is this like something they're doing? Are they bringing in just writers from other places to write a quick feature about something they're interested in? That's kind of interesting. I want to see if there's more of that. I kind of want to participate. I don't know. We'll see if I participate. I'm skipping over a lot of pages here because there are a lot of advertisements, but the advertisements are really interesting because each advertisement, every single one of them that I've seen in this book so far, is for a comic book I've never heard of, which is really, really, really exciting. This proves that it's not just this isn't just a magazine devoted to the mainstream superhero. This is for comics. That is really cool. Like I said, this is the kind of thing that will get people who are into mainstream to look more at the third party, and it's getting the third party to look more at the mainstream. It's uniting comic books as a fandom and comic books as a medium, not just superheroes. It's so cool. The center here, we have a brief explanation of how comic book fanzines have worked. And yeah, they specifically call out Wizard, but something I didn't realize is that there were so many other magazines. So it's kind of neat to see this pedigree here and see where they're going with it. It makes me curious what these other magazines were like, especially since they're not necessarily shying away from any of their competition here. They have a drawing tutorial in like right after that, talking about how to draw pouches, how to draw bags for your characters, and it has a tutorial, it has thoughts on it. That's really, really cool. A big part of what separates a magazine from just something to read is that they usually have some kind of activity involved with it. You know, there's a crossword, or there's a word search, are two really popular ones. But a drawing tutorial, of course that needs to be in a comic book magazine. Half of the people who are reading comic books are artists themselves. We're artists as well as consumers of fun art. So having this here is really cool. We should draw. Let's practice drawing. Let's go. So now we have a new feature here. I'm really excited about this feature because this is the kind of thing that the comic book community desperately needs. This is their picks. They will just read tons and tons of comics and they will give us their editorial picks for them. This is the kind of thing that fills in that gap of what do I read next, because like they give you a brief overview of it. They aren't biased to whatever publisher exists. They just give you cool comics that you can read, and I'm excited to see what comes from this. I'm excited to try out some of these. We get a few more ads. Some of these are for comics, some of these are for comic shops, and Cosmic Comics! We have an ad for Cosmic Comics. I've been there. I love that store. It's a really, really cool store. No, I super endorse Cosmic Comics. If you're in the Vegas area, you should go to Cosmic Comics. It'll blow your mind. A lot more ads. This is probably how they keep it at $3 for a magazine that is bigger and longer than your average comic. But they have a lot of ads. They have a page here saying that you can buy an ad in the book. And they also have a little notice about what the next issue is. The next issue is going to feature Battle Beasts. Like, that's different, and that's really cool. You'll notice on the first issue of Wizard, they feature Spider-Man on it, which makes sense. If you're trying to push your first big thing, you're going to want a big name on it. This one, yeah, they had Absolute Batman on it, a huge name. Probably a lot of people picked this up thinking of it as a supplemental to Absolute Batman, which they make it very clear that it's not once you pick it up, but, you know, it's there. The fact that they're highlighting a third-party book in the next issue, that's huge. I'm really excited for that. After those ads though, we get a price guide. It's just 2 pages long and they've selected a handful of comics and a handful of single issues and highlight how much they cost. You can see that Amazing Spider-Man 300 from 1988 at a quality rating of 9.4 will fetch you $621. Or The Incredible Hulk number 180 from Marvel and published in 1974 with a quality rating of 6.5 will net you $487. Or you can find out that Amazing Fantasy number 15 published in 1962 at a 5.0 quality rating will net you $42,484. Ah, dang. We get a couple of top 10 lists. We get to see what the top 10 titles of the month are. And this is all according to actual data. This part isn't just, you know, editorial opinions. This part is actual data. We get to see the top 10 titles and what those are. We get to see the top 10 publishers. And we get to see top 10 cover artists, interior artists, writers. We have a couple more ads, and then at the very back, on the back cover, you have the pull list. And you're encouraged to go ahead and mark the books that you want, hand it off to your local comic shop, they'll put it in a box for you, and now you can get more comics. This is the cool thing I was talking about earlier. Every comic that they highlight, they list here. So if they said something and you were interested in it, you don't need to remember it later. You can hop back here, you can see what the title was, you can check mark it, hand it off to your comic shop, or more likely probably write it down and hand that off so you don't have to chop up the back cover of your book, which, you know, nobody wants to do that. And you know what? I'm impressed by this. This is really, really cool and really, really significant. This truly did do everything that Wizard was doing back in its heyday. For a very, very long time, people have been looking for something like Wizard. They're looking for something to come in and fill that void, had enough people working on it, was the right form factor to reach a wide enough audience that was interested in comics. And this does it. This checks all the boxes. I would love it if this became one of the longest, like the long-running books. I would love it if this just became like a reference that people will look back to and talk about and love and reverence like we do with Wizard magazine. And this is already setting itself up very well. But one of the quotes that kind of lives rent-free in my mind comes from Steve Jobs when he talked about how you don't judge the success of a company based on its first product, you judge it based on the success of its second and third. Can they repeat the lightning in the bottle that they have? I'm very excited for issue 2 of this. This is definitely going to become one of my regular pulls, I think. Because the value is here, the intrigue is here, and I like what they're doing. This is kind of cool, and it costs, $3. I just really hope the second issue lasts, and when it comes, maybe we'll talk about it then. But right now, I highly recommend that you go pick this up. This is a huge value. This is a great voice for the comic book community, something that we've been looking forward to for a long time. And not only that, as a comic book commentator myself, I find this extremely inspiring. I've wanted to make Comic Crash something like Wizard magazine. That's kind of my big goal dream. When I tell people what Comic Crash is, I say it's trying to be Wizard magazine. And this right here, this is really inspiring because this kind of gives me a look into what are other people doing. And I'm excited to see what kind of ideas I can glean from this and maybe integrate into the channel. Anyway, that's what I got for you guys today. Let me know, what was your favorite part of this magazine? Or what are you hoping to see from comic book conversation like this? Go ahead and let me know in the comments below, and until next time, thank you for joining me, have a great day, and remember to always be your best self.